Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Jesse Brisendine. Jess, it's great to have you on the show.
Gosh, it's great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited to have you on. And before we jumped into the interview, I want to read a little bit more about Jesse so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. An award winning speaker and best selling author, Jesse is a world renowned expert who works with individuals and organizations to move beyond their limitations, unlock their greatness, and build their Camelot. Business leaders, Hollywood celebrities, entrepreneurs, C suite executives, medical professionals, and educators have utilized Jesse's services to achieve unprecedented levels of personal mastery and fulfillment. Jesse is a big fan of buffets, professional wrestling, and finding the silver lining in any situation. And I had the pleasure of being on Jesse's show. He's done so many awesome things. I really enjoyed having a conversation with him. One of the best things I think we found out a little bit later on in the interview is that we both have one of our favorite quotes we share is "Don't tell me the sky's the limit," because there's footprints on the moon. And you have to check out his TED Talk. Very powerful, life changing. I would say at that, over 300,000 views, and he provides loads of great content and information on his YouTube and so many great places. So Jesse, pleasure to have you on the show. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I'm Gosh. Thank you so much again for having me.
Absolutely. Well, what I wanted to do to kind of kick everything off was rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
Gosh, how I got started. I think like so many people, I started at a crossroads, and my first real big crossroads I can remember actually was going through a breakup. As my first broken heart. I was absolutely devastated. Had all these emotions coming up. I had no idea how to deal with. I think as men too, we're often told, you're not supposed to. Big boys don't cry. Stiff upper lips. Suck it up. Get back out there. All those kinds of things. And none of that really resonated with me. And I had this epiphany, if you will, that I realized that if I didn't do something about this, I would likely end up right back where I was, but only more time would have passed. And so it really spoke to me that I need to do something to start to change, start to work on myself. And that has always played powerfully in my life, Gosh, where it's been this place of when I recognize that there's something I should do or I want to do, that I literally am at that crossroads of if I don't do this thing, then I will probably end up right back where I am, but the only difference is more time will have passed. And that's kind of really the nexus of so much of my journey is finding myself at that crossroad and asking myself that question: where do I want to go? And if I don't go that way, will I end up right back here with just more time having passed?
Yeah, and that's so powerful because I think, and I don't know if you've had that exact same situation. I feel like I have, where sometimes when you're going through those difficult, challenging times, you feel hopeless and you feel like there's not anything to do. But I feel like that question or maybe that realization or that statement that you said is so powerful because it starts to, I guess, remind us that we can do certain things. Maybe not to change the situation or what happened, but at least maybe change our perspective or how we're looking at it.
And that's the piece right there. Is it's we there's always something we can do, and there's always something we can change. And I do some mentorship for a group of about 2,500 widowed men, and many of these men are accomplished individuals. They've built big businesses, they've had very prestigious positions, and they all have that common thing that unites them, in that they've all lost a spouse, a significant other. And what's remarkable is you have these people who are so great or have been so great at solving problems, finding solutions, and been highly compensated to do that. Some of them have been disruptors of industry, and yet they find themselves all at that same crossroads of dealing with that emotional turmoil. What am I supposed to do? And we always talk about this: is how important it is to start small. And I think that's the case with even business owners too. Many business owners fail because they try to do too many things too fast. I think many leaders, they might fail because they try to do too many things too fast. You come into an organization, you're the new person in charge, and if you go and try to just flip everything up on its, upside down, it's going to be really hard for people to acclimate and adjust. Remember, humans are always creatures of comfort. Familiarity is the place that we like to be. We like to spend our time in. It's why most of us don't disrupt our life, or at least we only do it a little bit at a time. And if we cause too much disruption too quick, you're going to end up disrupting the very thing that you don't, which is going to be the personnel. So it's always great to be strategic, start small, identify those key areas of focus, and then build some momentum from there.
Yeah, and I think so many times we don't realize like how much doing something different, getting outside of our comfort zone, how easy it is. Sometimes it's really cool to have on a bumper sticker, t-shirt, things like that. But when we're actually rolling up our sleeves to do it, it's
Yeah,
not as fun. We kind of retreat, maybe if we're not knowing it consciously how we're going to make that happen.
100%. It's, we all have this idea of what, of who we are, of how we would be when we're in a leadership role. And rarely is that idea exactly, does it mirror reality when we're actually in that position, in that leadership role, especially because usually the ideas are void of actually dealing with the human component of it, human emotion, human personnel challenges, supply chain issues, political regulation, whatever it is that comes with that. And that's where having that flexibility of recognizing that the idea of who we are when we're and versus when we're actually in there rolling up our sleeves might be a little bit different. And giving ourselves grace is such an incredible power. Now, grace in alignment with decision are two very important things, because often as leaders we have to make decisions. That's why we're in that position, is we have to decide, we have to make decisions that are going to be what we believe the best course for the company, for the stakeholders, for the personal and everything else. But we also need to give ourselves grace in that rush to making decisions, that rush to filling in the what role of our leadership, that rush into really finding what our unique identity is in that, and recognizing that all of us have a learning curve, and why people may be looking at us and thinking that we have it all figured out. It's okay if we don't. We have to allow ourselves that opportunity to learn and grow, and so that we can evolve into that version of who we think we are when we'd be in that leadership position.
Yeah, and I imagine you obviously, having interactions, working with, so many high performing people. I imagine that grace is something like if you're driven, you want to go to the next point. And sometimes we forget about like I usually call it that human part of business, but even that human part of life at that. And having that grace seems like a big part of that of like if you're trying something new or if something maybe disruptive is happening in an industry or in your life or all those things, sometimes we don't give ourselves grace because we are high achieving. We want to get to that next goal, and we sometimes don't give ourselves space, time, or even that perspective to be able to do that.
You're 100% right. Should I had one of my clients message me the other day, and they're absolutely crushing it, and just listing off all these things they've gotten done, accomplishments, huge stuff. Their business partners pushing them, go, 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 keep pushing, keep pushing. We're like breaking through. I wrote them back, congratulations, and then I said, when are you resting?
Mm.
Right? Where is your rest time in here? Because it's so fascinating. I just watched the movie the other day, Gran Turismo. Have you seen that one yet?
I haven't seen it. I used to love playing the game though.
Yeah. So if you love playing the game, I think you'll really appreciate the movie. It's absolutely fascinating, based on a true story of a player who was only played the video game, never raced a car,
Mhm.
and ends up going on to compete professionally in that circuit. Still racing today. I think to date he's raced in over 200 races, has won first place several times, all these kinds of things.
Mhm.
But I use that as an example, because here you have these super high performance cars. They're driving hundreds of miles an hour. They're defying the laws of physics, but that is all predicated on their ability to come back into a pit stop and rest and recover. So you have to come off the road. You have to fill up with gas. You have to switch out your tires. You have to do all these things to be able to sustain perform at the highest level. And if you miss that pit stop, if you don't put that strategy, don't play that strategy as you should, you run a risk of collision, breakdown, all these sorts of things. So even at the highest levels, the most high performing engines in the world recognize that there is a necessary merit in resting and recovering. And we have to remember that too for ourselves, is that we can go, 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 do, accomplish, achieve. And if we are not doing the recommended pit stops for ourselves, which many of us don't, right? We know how much of a crisis is in our country with obesity, with burnout, with stress, with overwhelm, with mental health. All that is an indicator to me that we're not making enough time to rest, to recover, to pit stop and take care of our own engine. So it's vitally important that when we're doing that in a leadership position, whatever that is, that we're prioritizing that for ourselves, and then we're also advocating that to the people that we serve.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And especially, I would say, and I imagine you have those exact same conversations when you're in those leadership roles. A lot of times, the people will take cues based off of not just what you say, or probably not really what you say. A lot of times, it's what you do. So if you continue driving, you say, okay, I'm all about resting, recovery, and relaxation, but you're not also practicing that as a leader. I imagine that probably sends different messages and probably affects the overall culture of an organization as well.
100%. Right? We've all seen that person before who they say one thing and do another, and then
Mhm.
they end up showing up to the meeting, and it's the whole upper management team, and they show into there, and you can tell they haven't been taking care of themselves. You can tell they've been pushing it too hard. They come in there and they have circles under their eyes. They're not as engaged, not as focused. And then what ends up happening, they hijack the energy of the entire room. Even if they're just quiet and they
Mhm.
don't say anything, we can feel that something's off because in that moment, they're so worn down, they don't want to be there. They're not bringing or offering their best, but yet they'll expect their best of everybody else. We're trying to now interact with them in a way that we don't normally interact with them, which is going to be hard for us to adjust with on a fly, especially when they have some sort of authoritative role over us. And it throws it all off. And what ends up becoming an hour meeting that could really be used as a thing to spearhead growth and drive forward key focus points ends up becoming this thing where we're kind of tiptoeing and walking around in eggshells. And then everybody wonders, well, what happened? What went wrong? What's wrong with them? Well, what's wrong with them is they haven't been doing this exact thing we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think so many times you don't realize in order to go forward and in order to be effective and efficient, sometimes you have to take the step back, take those breaks, do those things. So I absolutely love that you brought that up and you were having those conversations because I think they're absolutely necessary and huge. Do you feel like I almost feel like a lot of times when you're driving towards a goal, or sometimes even if you're not driving towards a goal, you're just so close to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Do you feel like that's a lot of like how you work with and serve your clients by being able to kind of help them to see things maybe that they're too close to see and start to realize that, oh, I'm hitting goal after goal after goal, but I haven't even thought about rest and haven't even thought about like what that looks like. I haven't even thought about refueling or changing tire, all those
Yeah,
things. Do you feel like that's how you work with your clients?
I feel like so much of the game, gosh, is sustainability, right? And sustainability is something that a lot of us we don't necessarily, I think, look at initially, especially when we're hungry, especially when we're driven, especially when things seem to be going really well, or maybe they're not going so well, and we have our back against the wall and we're trying to scrap and claw and get things together. Sustainability is invaluable because it's that thing that we all recognize in some way that we should prioritize, be thinking about, but it's a thing that we don't necessarily do. I'll give you a short story.
Hmm.
I was really blessed that one of my very first clients I worked with out of college was somebody who had been on the cover of Forbes magazine, was a titan in the financial industry. I mean, had made decisions, done things, created programs in the financial industry that we're still utilizing today. It was a massive disruptor. And when I started working with him, he had literally it was an incredible story gone from the bottom started as a low level entry position to the CEO of one of the biggest most powerful companies in the world and had not prioritized his health and so as a result of that suffered a stroke in his 30s, a heart attack in his 40s.
Wow.
And here he was in his 60s at the time, more money than anyone could imagine, and because he hadn't prioritized his health, he hadn't been thinking of sustainability, he was
Mm.
barely able to function and enjoy day to day life. The thing that he loved to do more than anything at that season of his life was to be able to go out in his flower garden and garden. And
Mm.
the one thing that he couldn't do at that season of his life was go out and flower garden. He couldn't stabilize himself. He couldn't stand up and balance to do it. He could barely walk to do those types of things. So sustainability would be okay. Yes, I want to accomplish this, but gosh, how do I want to live my life in 30 years? How do I want to enjoy the success I'm creating now, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the road from now? And beyond that, I mean, we're alive at such a fascinating time where it's not unrealistic to think that the human life expectancy couldn't increase to 90, 100, 110 years in the next 10 to 15 years. And when we're thinking about that and we're thinking about, okay, if I'm going to really now get not just 20 more years, but maybe 40, 50, 70 more years, what kind of quality do I want those years to be? And sustainability is really going to be the key to that. The only way we're going to be sustainable at this, the only way the Gran Turismo movie, the last race, and it highlights the Le Mans, which is a 24-hour race. The only way you're able to sustain a 24-hour race is if you're coming out and doing the pit stops and making sure you're well maintained and running at optimal at all times.
Yeah, thank you so much in sharing that story. And it's so powerful. I think so many times when we hear sustainability, especially from a business standpoint, we're thinking of, okay, sustainability within the business, but we forget about that human part, sustainability of yourselves, that we're running a marathon ourselves. How do
Yeah.
we make sure that we're not just burning out at mile one or mile 10, that we have the 26 plus miles that we want to accomplish and we want to do it again and again and again. So it's so important that we do I think have that intentionality related to the things that we're doing so that we can make sure that we are ready for those marathons.
100%, man. It's we've all heard the story. I've known somebody who they've achieved unprecedented levels of success, and it came at great sacrifice. And the sacrifice was they come home to an empty home every night. They have a broken relationship with their partner if they haven't already been divorced. Their kids barely talk to them. They've missed all the birthdays between ages 3 and 15. And for what? Right? For what purpose was it? Was it really worth it? And so I get the whole thing. Yes, we have to sacrifice. Yes, there are going to be trade offs and all those types of things. Absolutely. But what you said, that alignment word is so critical. We can make all those decisions in alignment. It may not mean that we make every soccer game, but what it does mean is it means that the soccer games that we do make, we're committed to being there and being fully present or being engaged. We could tell you what the score was. We could tell you what plays were run. It's not that we're sitting there on our phone the entire time, checking email and making phone calls. I heard this story the other day and it absolutely broke my heart. A successful business person, and they were doing a family game night. They had gone away on a
Mm.
vacation, the first vacation they'd taken as a family for years. And they're doing a family game night with some other friends, and they were playing like charades or Pictionary or something like that. And the category or the clue was daddy, and the little kids had to act it out. And so one of them stood up and pretend they were on a cell phone
Mm.
and was turned their back to the group and was angrily pacing and yelling on the phone. And then the other kid goes, "Oh, daddy." And the dad, it broke his heart because he
Mm.
didn't realize that that was the image now that his kids saw them. But that's all they saw. When he was home, he wasn't engaged, he wasn't present, he was on his phone, back to the family, yelling. And so we look at sustainability, we look at alignment, we have to ask that question. Is that really an alignment with what you ultimately want? Is that really the future that you're trying to build towards? I recognize that you want to accomplish and do this professionally, but if that's going to be misaligned with personally, you are going to find that fulfillment is dramatically lacking, and all the money in the world, all the success, all the accolades, all the titles in the world will never be able to fill the hole that will come in the absence of those things.
Yeah, that's definitely gut wrenching. I can't imagine that. And I think it makes us like kind of relook at the things that we're doing on a daily basis and how we're living with intentionality on each aspect of our lives, especially for ourselves, but of course for those little ones, the family, the
Yeah,
friends. The reason that we're doing the things that we're doing. 'Cause one of the questions that you said for what? And I think little kids, a lot of times they'll ask why this, why that. And a lot of times we don't do that as far as like the things that we're trying to achieve. We're going, 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 but for what? Why are we doing that? And asking those questions sounds like it could be one of those most powerful things because it helps us to realign, it helps us to really
yeah.
understand the reason that we're doing the things that we're doing.
I had the opportunity last year to attend a dinner with Oprah Winfrey,
Mm.
and this was such a dream because Oprah's one of those people. I would say when I grew up in a very kind of secluded area, very poor. We had access to one channel. You had to kind of tweak the rabbit ears to do it. And so I got to watch Oprah every day through the snow, the static and stuff. And Oprah was really how I learned to be curious and learn to ask questions. And what was absolutely amazing about Oprah. So here's this woman who has accomplished so much. She's getting ready to turn 70. And she was saying she's had conversations with over 35,000 people in her career, and what she realizes is that all people want the same things. They want to be heard and they want to know what they have to say matters. And she was talking about some study, and I'm going to misspeak a little bit here, but the gist of it was is she's saying the study was on kids and about how they grew up based off of their parents' reactions. And so there was a very big difference in how kids grew up when they would walk in, they see their parents and their parents' eyes light up when they see them versus when parents walk in and they're just kind of whatever, they're disengaged. The kids who had parents walk in, their eyes light up, they grow up on a completely different path than the parents. And this is regardless of economic circumstances, social, everything else. But to think about that, the most important things that people treasure and matter from 35,000 people, you think about the breadth of people Oprah has sat with. This is a titan, and everybody of every industry, and she sat with them, had these kinds of conversations with them. And to say the things that they all value most is the presence, to know that what they have to say is matters and knows that when they're with somebody, they're really with somebody. And it's something that all of us could borrow from that and think like that question is asking myself, am I really giving my full self to the people I'm serving today? And also, but two, starting with us, am I giving my full self to myself? Going back to
Mm.
sustainability, right? And if we're not doing those things, if we want to correct something, we got to start with correcting ourselves.
Yeah, and that ends up being so powerful. The present is the present for a reason. And I love how you talked about, of course, for, other people, really be able to serve them and impact them and be there for them. But sometimes we forget that the most important person that we can be present for is ourselves and not thinking
Yeah,
about tomorrow, thinking about yesterday and living in that in between, but actually being present to this moment and seeing what we could do. Of course, paying attention to those things in their due time and their space. But we sometimes can rob ourselves of the beauty of what we have right now. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more on how you're working with your clients. Could you take us through a little bit more on what that looks like, how you're serving your clients, and of course, what I like to call your secret sauce, what you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
Yeah, my so typically the way I work with clients is we're really working on a few things. We're working on behavioral strategy, right? So behavioral strategy is critical. Mindset, heart set is paramount, right? Or is what we think, what we feel, are we in alignment there? Is it really, or what we're doing really what we want to be doing? There's so much important work to be doing around that. And then we're working on present building and future creating. So what that means is really just identifying again. And so many of us are so, I think, stuck in the past or looking too much in the future, we miss out on the right now. Some of the most successful people that I work with, they find the most tremendous value in being able to be grounded, to be able to learn how to just be really centered and be where their feet are, and to be really able to maximize those moments. Because then what ends up following is that intentionality, right? The step I'm going to take, this next step I'm going to take, is a step towards the future I really want to build, or the future I think I should be building, because we're
Mm.
always building something. And then the other piece, what was the second part of your question, Gresham? I'm sorry.
Just your superpower, your secret sauce, what you
Secret
feel kind of sets
sauce.
you apart.
Secret
Yes.
sauce. My secret sauce. God, I love that question. I would say my secret sauce is, God, this sounds so funny to say, but I think my secret sauce is really I'm getting better and better at really just being myself.
Mm.
And in so doing, that scope of relatability that comes with that, or just that authenticity. I think that word almost gets a little too thrown around these days, but really there's something powerful that comes with that, because as soon as you're able to just be you, and a lot of the people I work with, I mean, some of them are pretty powerful people in their own right. So they're used to people just having conforming, being a certain way around them. And then when you have somebody like me who just, it's just me. I remember I did a keynote near the end of last year, and you and I were talking about before. I love professional wrestling,
Mm.
and I started the keynote with doing a mock wrestling promo from the stage. I always said, "Oh, I always wondered what it would be like if I came out on the stage and said, 'Oh, you know something, brothers,' or 'Can you smell what I'm cooking?' or something like that."
Right.
And this is a 150 or so people who are all very how's the word? Not in a certain kind of industry that you would not normally think
Yeah.
would be that
They,
way.
they're not the wrestling fans.
Yeah, they're not the wrestling fans, but the thing is it's just me being me. And so what you see happen is that you have a few people that are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I have to sit through this guy," but everybody else kind of relaxes and says, well, "Okay, well, whatever this guy has to say, at least he's just being himself."
Right.
And I think that's not just my secret sauce, but I really think it's the superpower that all of us can really tap into in a world where there's so much pressure for us to try to be like, or fit into, or be this way or be that way. There is something quite incredible and remarkable about being yourself. And I
Yeah.
and I think that when you show up that way, it starts to give other people permission to start to show up in that way too. Because I think all of us would feel tremendous less stress if we didn't have to fit into the roles that we found ourselves in. Our society has pushed us in so many ways, or we can at least mold those roles so it can be more uniquely us and not so much the confines of it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. It's so funny that you said that. I was literally took the words out of my mouth because I was gonna say I feel like when you are yourself and you're able to step into that in totality, it does give people permission to be themselves as well too. It's like, oh, you came out, saying, do you smell what I'm cooking? Now I feel like I can do my thing when I go on stage, and it starts to really, I think, make the world a better place for one, because I think we start to appreciate each other more. And even if we're
Yeah.
not appreciated as much as we want to be, you still have freedom in that, and you still have freedom to continue to do that. And I think it really starts to have us tap into our true superpowers, where we start to see really innovations and problems, just all
Yeah.
those things happen in those different perspectives, which I think at the end of the day make the world a better place.
100%. What's funny is that when people came up after the keynote was done to ask questions, there was this lady that came up and she's got a smile on her face, and she comes up to me and she's like, I have so many questions to ask, but the first one I have to ask is, who's your favorite wrestler?"
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
you're my people.
There you go. There, and what we have to know, what's the answer?
Oh, yeah. So at that time, I was telling her that I used to, I never could stay on edge because he did his bad guy job so well. But then
Right.
he broke his neck and I had to walk away. And I remember there's a video on YouTube where if you can watch it, even if you're not a wrestling fan, you can appreciate where he has to retire the belt and he talks about his neck. And so he asked the audience, he said, "I'm going to miss this so much. Can I run down to my music just one more time with all of you cheering?" And so he goes back up, does his thing, does his entrance again. Everybody just claps. And I was just like, man, there was something so genuine
Mm,
about it. Like, yeah, in that moment, his whole heel persona, his bad guy persona melt away. And you saw this guy who was so passionate about it. So when
mm,
he came back a couple years ago from an injury, unexpected after being gone for 9 years, he's
mm.
been my favorite. I've been rooting for that guy just, really consistently in the last few years because it was such a beautiful story of not giving up on your passion and about doing the very thing that you love and doing it so well. And then his whole kind of swan song now has been about just appreciating and savoring what he wasn't able to do in his 20s and his 30s and being able to just have such gratitude for the people he works with and the fans and everything. It's been really special to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely, touching as well too, because, everything's so precious and it can be so fragile at times to be able to appreciate those things, appreciate, getting to hear that music for him and what that meant and even seeing that and what that represented. We all have those things in us. And that's why, going back to what you're talking about, that present part is so huge because if you're able to be present on who you are, the people that are around you, people that love you, care you, things that you do, whatever it is, then again, that ends up being our song that we can walk and
Yeah.
kind of have those shares every single day. But we have to be present for that to happen.
Yeah. 100%, man.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have, but what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
A morning routine is absolutely critical. A good morning routine is absolutely critical. And I'll share you very kind of the brief overview of mine. So waking up first thing in the morning before I even get out of bed, I do a 3 minute, it's about 2 to 3 minute memory exercise. So the memory exercise is I want to work my mind. So I do my best to recall the day I just lived, the previous day,
Mm,
the last 24 hours. Details who I passed when I was walking, who I talked to, what we talked about. And then I'll identify three things I always want to remember. So it's this exercise of trying to pull stuff from short term to long term. Typically, we usually only do that involuntarily when we have something that's a really high peak emotional state. I
right.
want to try to download into my long term memory things that I'm assigning emotional significance. I'm being more intentional about that.
Mm,
And then I will spend a few minutes journaling. So, journaling for me, I have a very specific process that I've built out. I actually just launched a journal last week for it that kind of mirrors that. But it's basically I'm looking at gratitude, of course. What are the most important things I want to get done this day? I do a couple affirmations that are just really acknowledging myself, and then I want to have an end of the day journal session too that we're looking at wins of the day and just kind of reflections, but really just honing in on the key things. And there's space for only 3 to 4 key things, and that's really important because I think a lot of us were too busy, and we're so busy that we don't get some of our best work done because we're too busy doing all the other stuff. So doing something like this, it really helps hone in the focus. And after that, I go and do some exercise. So I'll go outside, walk, go for a run, something like that to get the heart rate up. And while I'm doing this, I will do some I will statements. And I will statements are basically things I will accomplish. So it could be anything from I will be a New York Times bestselling author in the next 5 years. I will really serve my people I work with today. I will give 115% to my clients. I will be fully engaged when I have the podcast interview, whatever that is, by run through some of my will statements. And it's really powerful to do that while exercising, while getting your heart rate up by physiologically engaging your body, because you just find that you're more energy. You'll walk taller, you'll feel better, you
mm.
come back more fired up for the day. Most of us make the mistake of just rolling right into our day or reacting. We pick up our phone, we look at our email, and we start responding to whatever's on there. And that's a crapshoot. It could be good, it could be bad, depending on what industries we're in. So starting your day with some intention, having a solid morning routine, it's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you so much in breaking that down and providing some context into to not only what you're doing, but why you're doing it and that intentionality,
100%.
because I think it provides so much value. And I never really thought about that. It's that 2 to 3 minute exercise about like how sometimes things just pop into your mind and it makes you recall, but actually you can be intentional about that and kind of remember or value the things or prioritize those things if you have the exercise or activity that allows you to do that.
Yeah, it is. And it's something that once you start doing that, even if the worst thing it does is it forces you to slow down just for a couple minutes and review your day, then that's still a pretty significant win. Because in reviewing our day, we can often pull from it some really great nuggets of wisdom about what we can apply for the day to come. And then if the best thing it does is if it helps you deepen the appreciation for the day you lived, that's something that's really powerful too, because you find yourself just learning to savor certain moments a little bit more. And so what I'll do is I had a meeting cancel last week as an example. And I ended up, because it canceled, I decided to go for a walk down by the ocean, which I live next to it, but because it's like anything, when you live close to something, you just don't do it as much because it's
Right.
kind of the novelty's worn out. So I go down for a walk on it, and I just did the whole thing as if I had never really walked on the ocean before. And I felt so good with it. I felt so just energized, and I was saying to myself, boy, I should really do this thing more often, right? But the problem is we say it and then we don't do it. So when I do the morning reflection the next day, and then I'm going through and reviewing that, and I'm reminding myself, wait, when you did that, you felt really good. You're seeing you do it more. So now what I do is I take some of those things as that I'm reflecting on and learning, and I'm applying them to my I will statements. I will make it a point to at least once a month go for a walk on the beach and be able to just sit there in gratitude and experience it. I will make sure once a month I go into the ocean and just enjoy the simple pleasure of allowing the water to wash over my legs or whatever that is. And then what ends up happening is you start to pick these little pieces that you're identifying as behaviorally helpful, whether it's personally, professionally, whatever that is, and then you can start applying them. You're not leaving it to chance. We all have wonderful ideas that we don't write down, that we don't act on, because again, we have a sea of stuff, or we don't have a system to review those things and to reflect on them and to really integrate them into our DNA. And then they kind of flutter away to the wayside. But when you start doing a little routine like this, I find that it's really, really powerful, and it has really elevated how I show up both personally and professionally. And I can, and as I've been doing it, I've had more I've had more great memories, and it's interesting. I've had more great memories not doing necessarily the big great stuff than I would have ever had other times, and because of that, I'm finding more enjoyment in my day to day life.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and it's a lot of times I found this myself, especially during the pandemic, when I started to make sure to be very intentional about gratitude and be able to kind of
Mm,
understand those things. It makes you a lot more present of the things that are happening, because I think again we can be go go go, we can go on to the next thing, or we think about, okay, I have to do this this and this today, that we didn't even realize what are the wins I had yesterday. How can I
yeah.
potentially replicate those today and tomorrow, and start to create and have those as part of my system. But you only do that if you take the time and create the space in order for that to happen, which is why I love each aspect of that morning routine. But that really stuck out to me.
And it's like I think so many of us, we've all experienced since the pandemic, right? Time is going faster than it ever has before. The pandemic has officially ripped a hole in the space-time continuum, and all of us are trying to figure out where the hell did time go. I mean, I caught myself even just the other day saying, yeah. I mean, 6 months ago, it's like we're talking about 2020. No, that was 4 years ago now.
Right.
And so if that continues, it's safe to assume that time is going to continue to accelerate for all of us, which means we probably have less days in front of us than we do behind us.
Mhm.
And if that's really the case, if we're sprinting towards the finish line rather than jogging, we can really maximize whatever time we have by taking the time to really stop and slow down and appreciate our days and appreciate simple little moments, simple little things, and those kinds of things too. I, it's funny to say this. I drill this home to clients who are in leadership positions all the time. The more you can be great about being grateful for little things, the more you are going to find little things to recognize in the people that you are leading. And those little things are often going to mean and matter more to them than some of the most significant things they do, because the things they do is what they do. It's a function of their job. But the little things are an assessment of who they are. And so when you start to really see a person for themselves, not just their performance, but them, that's where you start to get to the gold of human understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of the quote, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And I think so many
Yeah.
times we're in this perspective of this is what this person cares about because I care about it. But a lot of times those quote unquote small things end up being huge things to them because they want to be seen, they want to be appreciated. All those conversations that you said, hearing from Oprah as well too, like those are things that are human elements that if we start to value those and be grateful for those, then it starts to create a really powerful watershed moment as well.
You mentioned Oprah again. I wanted to tell you this about the story because it was so
Mhm.
cool. So going back, we talked a little bit about presidents. We talked a little bit about ourselves. So Oprah saying 35,000 people she sat from. She's interviewed all the presidents, all the heads of states, even blah, blah, blah. And so I'm wondering, okay, this is really cool. Like she's up here, she's talking about this. Does she really practice it? Oprah has her remarks, and then she has this Q&A portion of her thing. And so the way it's set up is there's one person sitting on one side, Oprah in the middle, and somebody else sitting to the other side of her. And the the person who asked the first question was seated to Oprah's left, or yeah, to Oprah's right. I'm sorry. And when it's her turn to ask the question, Oprah turns to this woman, like fully turns to her. So she's not looking at us now, she's looking at her. She leans in like this. And you can see her eyes just open up. A smile goes across her face. You're sparkling. And I watched it. And it was just one of the most friggin' beautiful things I've ever seen because Oprah was so with that woman. And you could see how she responded too, right? Like there was some part of her that recognized that not that this was just Oprah Winfrey giving her a presence, but that this was another human that was fully present with her, that didn't have anywhere else to go, didn't have anywhere else to be, wasn't going to be distracted by her phone, wasn't going to have something buzzing or beeping or distracting her. And we've all had those experiences with people and to see how much it matters. And so it's something to say that at a time when our attention is arguably the biggest commodity out there right now. Everybody's vying for it, everybody's competing for it, everybody's deploying all sorts of clever ways to command it. That recognizing what the Googles have figured out, the Microsofts, the Facebooks have figured out, our attention is worth so much. And so if we recognize that it's worth so much, let's really be intentional about where we put that attention. Let's give
Mm.
it to where we are going to get the maximum ROI on it, or really the ROI squared, which is return on impact, and return on investment. It's both of those pieces.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think sometimes again we know that, and sometimes you hear it and you say it like, okay, attention's important. And I think sometimes when we're marketing or trying to get, speak to people, whatever it is, you realize how important that attention is. But we often don't realize how we wield the attention as well. That the other side of that, of like how even if we're paying attention to our loved ones, or we are really all in on whatever that professional goal is, or our employee, or whatever it is that we decide to put that attention, that's value that you're
Yeah,
transacting, so to speak. And if we start to wield that and be intentional with that, then again, some really phenomenal things can happen. Like you said, it goes to squared to fourth to on up. It creates that domino effect, it sounds like.
yeah, it really does. It really does, Gresh. It's like you and I both share that appreciation for quotes, and it's that Maya Angelou quote, right? People won't remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Hmm.
And I think about that. If there's one quote I probably think of more than anything, it's probably that one, right? And it's that piece of we all can acknowledge and appreciate that human emotion, our experience, how we feel is it's that's the real game of life we're playing, right? It's the ultimate game. Anybody who's pursuant of a success goal right now. So we're trying to make a certain amount of money, we're trying to scale to a certain place, whatever that is. If you were to play the game where you're going to ask yourself, what's the point of that? What's the purpose of that? And you did that enough, you're going to see that at some point down the road, you're always going to get to an emotion. There's always a belief that's attached to it. Like when I have this much money, then I'll finally be happy. When I have this much money, then I'll finally be this or that, or I'll feel this way. If we know that to be true, it would make sense that we start to structure our lives in such a way that we're pursuant and in alignment with those goals already right now. Happiness doesn't have to be the champagne bottle at the end of the race. Happiness should be the race. It should be the
Mm.
co-pilot and or whatever that is for you. And then also recognizing that, the beautiful thing about all 8 billion of us is we are so much more similar than we are different. And so what that suggests is that what might be true for you and I is probably true for others too. It's just being able to explain it in a certain way or demonstrate in a certain way or enculturate it in a certain way that makes it in a way that people really embrace and say, God, this feels good. This feels like home.
Yeah, absolutely. And it ends up being so powerful because very much so, like I think we're so much more aligned than we are different, even though we obviously have our difference, our superpowers are things that set us apart. But I think at the end of the day, that human element is so huge. And I think we have that appreciation of all those things in such a unique way. So absolutely love that. Would you consider that to be a little bit what I call a CEO nugget? That's a little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice. I like to say it might be something you would tell your favorite client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
Yeah, I, I like that. If I were to hop into a time machine, I would tell myself, I would say, there's going to be a time where you're going to really value that we realize what you value most is sustainability in that emotional experience. And so if that's really the case, integrate that right now. It doesn't have to be, that doesn't have to come, whatever you're going to build, pursue, achieve, it doesn't have to come at a sacrifice of that.
Yeah, and we have to realize that again, the present is such a gift, and we don't have to wait until later. It doesn't have to be at the end of the rainbow that lucky charms where we're seeing and we're going through that journey, and it's at the end. It's something that, especially you hear a lot of the successful people they incorporate on a day-to-day basis, and that's what ends up quote unquote leading them there. So, absolutely appreciate that, and want to now ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on the show. So, Jesse, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Gosh, what does it mean to me? It means that you have been entrusted to enter into a sacred exchange, and that sacred exchange is that the people who will follow you are going to be dedicating the most precious resource they have, which is their time, with you in exchange for you providing for them means to live their life. That's kind of the traditional structure, but I would encourage them to look at it as that they are engaging in that sacred exchange. They're giving you their time. You're going to be exchanging that resource to providing money so they can live their life. But more than anything, you have that opportunity to have that time be meaningful in such a way that it enriches life, not just beyond financially, but emotionally, spiritually, physically. We all, that I would argue that fulfillment is the name of the game that we're all playing, even though if it's not completely spoken or articulated. The majority of us will spend approximately 2/3 of our waking life at work. And if you are one of those people who is entrusted to lead a group of those people who are making that exchange with you, consider what that real opportunity is. It's not just to grow the business, it's not just to skyrocket the company, but it is a way to lead the people who are following you to a place where not only are they financially better off, but they are emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever that is, better off too.
Nice. I absolutely love that. That word sacred really kind of resonated with me, but also being entrusted with the opportunity to do that and look at that more holistically than sometimes we think, okay, this person has, is making this amount of dollars or is spending this amount of time. But really, like as we talked about before, that leadership aspect, you get to make an impact on that person, sometimes that person's family, sometimes that person's community. So it's to really start to think holistically on the leadership and the opportunity that you have because it really can again create that domino effect that changes not just that person's life but the entire world as a result.
Absolutely, Rashi. You nailed it. It really is. There's a beautiful domino effect that can happen when it starts with you.
Absolutely. Well, Jesse, truly appreciate that definition. And of course, I appreciate your time even more. So, what I wanted to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people can get a hold of you, find out about all the awesome things that you're working on.
The one thing I'll say is pretty obvious, and that's anybody who's watching or listening. You've probably followed Grush for quite some time now, and you know what an awesome guy he is. I was lucky enough to meet him last year, and there's people that you meet where you instantly just get a good feeling from him, and he's definitely one of them. So if this is your first time here watching, listening, or if it's your 13th, stick with him. The guy is true to his word. You can tell it's coming from the right place, and in a sea of people and voices, he's one that you definitely want to listen to. And I would say that over and over again. And I'm just really grateful you gave me the opportunity to share this space with you today. About getting a hold of my work, just go and type me in all the social channels, everything. I'll pop up right away, and I'll be happy to connect with you there.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much again, Jesse. Appreciate the kind words tremendously. And of course, we're going to have the links and information in the show notes to make it even easier so that everybody can find you. But truly appreciate you for taking some time out. Appreciate you for giving, your gifts, your talents, your experiences, because I think so many times we don't look at life in the present. We can look at the before, we can look at the after, we can think of things that we're going to do. We don't sometimes see that value that we have. So thank you so much for giving us that value today and appreciate you, my friend. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
You too, man. Thank you so much.